The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
I am Emily Swallow, also known as the Armorer on The Mandalorian. And I'm just giving a little shout out to the Secrets of Star Wars podcast because this is the way.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, episode 106.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Hi everyone, I'm Thomas Sanjurjo, aka The Ronin, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away, including the deeper themes and meanings. Today we're discussing the second chapter in the Book of Boba Fett, The Tribes of Tatooine. And joining me on the panel today are the Bendu herself, Angela Sealana.
Hello everyone.
Hi, nice to have you. And old Ben, Mike Creavey.
All I could think of was Uta Guta, but I was like, that means like going somewhere, doesn't it? So anyway,
right.
hey everybody.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be here for a little while talking about the tribes of Tatooine. So
yeah.
Just to start off with, I've been hearing from a lot of people that they really enjoyed this episode a lot more than the first episode. So let me just get your takes both on this episode versus the first one.
Yes, everything is better after this this episode. I would say my first impression towards the end was that I wanted to just break down sobbing, but it was just too mesmerizing for me to like stop and express emotion. I was just, I mean, obviously we're going to talk all about it. But I was just so happy for anyone who has any kind of indigenous ancestral claim, and especially Tamara Morrison after this episode, for him to have been reborn as Boba Fett and then to pay tribute to the original indigenous people of Star Wars. I was just like, I was very, very moved, and it was really a piece of art. So I'm looking forward to diving in.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem, of course, with the first episode. I definitely like this one more. My guess was, I mean, if you kind of see episodes 1 and 2 as kind of this continuous story, the more I thought about it, I was like, as much as I was like bummed, as we said last week, Angela and I were talking about this, to kind of like, no, I want more, at the end of that, if you kind of imagine, at least in my mind, if you imagine episodes 1 and 2 together and try to split them precisely in the middle, I don't really think there was as good of a place to cut. So like all things considered, I thought, if you look at where they stopped at the end of episode 1, this one then being a little bit longer, it just seemed to be, looking back on it retrospectively, a little better of a dividing point between the two of them, and so I think for those who wanted more, well, you got more this week, quite a bit more, and some really awesome stuff, a lot of great throwbacks. We'll talk about some classic, even for those of us who haven't seen it or seen it in a long time, some of these sort of classic film kind of influences for certain elements of this were really awesome. So yeah, I'm excited to unpack it.
Yeah, definitely. I think I think for me too, it was I really liked this one. I love the indigenous influences to it, and this plot that's built there around the Tuscans and who they are and why they are struggling with where Tatooine is, and some really good development of what Tatooine is, which I was super impressed by. I was so happy for that to kind of be thrown in. So it's neat to see this one. I felt like this is the most fleshing out of Star Wars lore that we've got, even with The Mandalorian. Like, I don't think The Mandalorian did as much to really push the boundaries of what we know, which is so funny because it's all Tatooine, but it pushed the boundaries so much of what we know. Yeah, exactly. That's it. It goes back to the origin, to that little speck of sand in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
So I will just dive into it, and I think as we go through, we'll be talking about all the different aspects of it. So I'm just going to go synopsis. I've seen people don't know how to handle this series, which is cool. I love it because that means that it's really it's taking off, and people are trying to wrestle with how to address the issues that are happening with it. But I'm just going to go chronologically in the episode itself. So what we saw on screen, I'm going to kind of walk through that, which is our MO, but I just wanted to let people know that I'm doing that rather than trying to, start in the past and then come up to the present. So this chapter opens up with in the present, where we left off the last chapter, with the assassin that they captured needing to be dealt with. And I thought that the nods back to Return of the Jedi here were just absolutely fantastic. So they bring him into Jabba's room. They put him down on the block right above the false pit, the drop pit into the Rancor's room, and then they threaten him, and he refuses to talk, and we get the droid informant, which is classic Star Wars, right? The droid is going to tell us what's going on in the way that they do, which they don't understand human interaction as well, but they're going to explain to us why this guy's not going to talk, and then Boba's going to make him talk. So what do you guys think about this scene?
Oh, I was just like 50-50. Oh my gosh, are they going to actually have a Rancor? Right. But then it was like, no way. Like, are they just starting out from basically scratch? Like, I didn't doubt that Fennec was pretty, savvy in terms of doing her own kind of arm twisting to try to get somebody to talk. So I was kind of happy with the way that it turned out, to where, there's just so much that you can give us in one episode. If there had been a Rancor, I think it would have been like more than I could have handled with this whole episode.
Where'd they get the Rancor from? Oh my God. Which, because the Rancor is not even like a native species of Tatooine, so it's not like they could have just gone out and gotten one. That was something that Jabba had shipped in. And
well, I don't think we ever got confirmation on what the status of the one, was it Moochie or what, the one that Bib Fortuna came and picked up. But I mean, that of course was years before Return of the Jedi. So it's like, they did confirm that was not the same one that we saw in Return of the Jedi. So it's like, we only see one in Jedi. But then, like, even when she said before, like, if you had spoken such insolence, Jabba would have fed you to his menagerie. Like, that's plural. So I don't know. I didn't know what to expect. I think I did expect to see something, but at the end of that scene, I wasn't like upset or anything. I was just like, yeah,
I think it was totally better. It was totally better that there wasn't anything, right? That that they really are. They just they don't have. And I think we get more of that because so this scene, the assassin says, okay, well, it was the mayor that sent me, and he freaks out because he thinks there is going to be a Rancor behind the door. He says the mayor sent me. And so there's obviously only one option. Fett now has to go deal with the mayor of Mos Espa. He's got to go meet him. And he goes. And I love the scenes of him walking through the street because it's very reminiscent of The Mandalorian, where people kind of like watch The Mandalorian walking down the street. But then at the same time, it's a complete gag here because as soon as he gets into the building, everybody comments on the fact that they didn't hear his litter arrive.
Right. And you know what? Just as a random thing that I happened to notice is like the people that were staring at him as they were walking to the mayor's office or whatever, it was Trandoshans, which are basically huge lizards. And then what happens like at the end of the episode, I was like, huh, that's interesting. Like we kind of started and ended with the lizards in this episode.
They were watching him on his quest, right? Watching him on his walk. Yeah, but I think it's hilarious because like the first episode we heard that a couple of times where people were like, oh, I didn't hear your litter arrive, and this we in coming up shortly we're going to find out why, but it's humorous to see that. And then the moments of just absolute mundane bureaucracy in this
I loved
series.
It was like The Office, I had
perfect.
Like genre whiplash, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, well, and I think it's perfect because like he's running a crime syndicate in a town where that's the norm. It's not
Right.
like it's weird for him to be the crime syndicate lord.
What do you guys think? I am curious about with the humor side of it, because I know like a couple people brought this up, and I'm not sure exactly where I stand yet on it, but I think there's a good point, because this goes to more Star Wars like in the last few years, but like I just feel like it really is tricky to get that humor just quite right, because the originals had that humor, but it's like I've heard it described as like it can't be like Marvel though. Like there's a different, so there were some people that were critical of like, I kind of got a kick out of it, but like the Major Domo and like the mullet dude at the desk there, when they go in, just like, oh, do you have an appointment and everything? And so that, but I thought I heard a good argument though. And I'm just wondering where you guys are on that, at least as far as like, is that not quite entirely Star Wars humor? Is that, it reminds me of like the General Hux kind of banter, at the beginning of Last Jedi, which didn't really match Force Awakens. You know what I mean? Like when Poe's kind of like joking about Hux's mom and stuff. And I just remember being in the theater laughing, but being like,
this doesn't feel like Star Wars.
So I wonder about that a little bit. Like I said, I'm not really sure, but just I don't know.
I think in this case it works, and the reason I was
it
thinking about
to
that
fit
too,
better here. I thought,
well, and because the point they're trying to make here is that we don't have gigantic starships.
Right.
The hut space is like, a hut is a very large, imposing, impressive thing. And the problem that Fett is having right now is that he hasn't made that figure of himself.
Right. Like nobody cares. Like
it's like, bounty hunter.
Yeah.
Like who? I don't even know your name.
Right.
That's who
it's
this
like
guy is.
Joe
And
Schmo
the
at
whole
DMV.
palace is like empty. It's like you get the impression it's like him, Fennec, and two like Gamorrean guards and a droid. Like there's no
sitting around
Rancor.
a 20 person table eating.
Right,
the
like
Gamorreans are down on the far end.
Max Rebo doesn't even come by anymore. Like it's
no, he's too busy over at Madame
The
Garza's.
Sanctuary.
He's making good money at the Sanctuary.
So so I think that's why this humor works here. Whereas when you try and place it in the middle of the actual war,
right,
and it's opposing sides of the actual war, like if it had been two members of the same side in the actual war,
that's true,
bantering with each other, it would have been okay. But like when it's
like none of these people are main characters, per se, right?
Exactly, and so that's why I think it works.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and that's why I felt like really I loved this scene, because it really does show that he doesn't have a handle on this yet.
Right.
And we like Fett, and I think he's got a really big space in our minds. And that's one of the things that Favreau is trying to show with these setups is he's not the name that we have associated with him in Star Wars,
right?
Because
he's just a bounty hunter.
Him. Yeah,
right. It's like
he
you
was
almost
just the guy
expect him
that Jabba hired.
It's like he's going to start dropping like, I was in Empire Strikes Back. They're like, oh, okay, yeah. Like,
which it goes to show that just because you've been close to the Skywalker story doesn't mean that you're all that, right?
Right. Yeah.
There is a rest of the galaxy going on. So they meet with the mayor. They finally manage to get themselves in, and the mayor is an Ithorian, and I love the way they handled that, so that the Ithorian voice was weird and alien, and then there's just like this regular voice that came through on the translator.
Yeah, it's like your English teacher talking to you or something. Yeah,
right. Well, and that was Robert Rodriguez, I think, right? They said he was the voice of the mayor, which is kind of a cool credit,
Well, yeah, and I think that and this whole scene's really interesting because it kind of turns the concept of who's in charge on its head.
Yeah,
and just really develops the fact that this guy has had to hold his position amongst a changing leadership, and that he was there when Jabba the Hutt was the syndicate, or was the leader, and then he passed through all of the turmoil after that. So he's got his place. He's fine. Oh, yeah. He doesn't need to worry about this new guy coming in.
Well, and like, Empire, now it's New Republic. And it's like none of that even. Yeah. It's like, nope,
exactly.
Shoot the assassin. Like it's just like.
He's got his little empire of Mos Espa. That's his thing, and you can't mess with him.
Right.
And he knows it. He knows that's where he is. And so he's kind of pushing that issue. And I love here the part of the scene where he offers a bounty, basically. Like that's what he's saying, is that, oh, you brought us this assassin, and they shoot him, and they're like, oh, thanks for doing the job, and then, you know, go give the guy his money, give the guy his reward for this. And Boba Fett mentions, I'm not a bounty hunter, which is a big turn for us as the audience, like going, oh, really? This is a change.
Right, he's the bounty hunter. Like, you know.
Yep. And then the mayor sends him back to the sanctuary, sends him back to Madame Garza's.
And I love the advice that he gives him too, where he says running a family is more complicated than bounty hunting. So it's interesting, this concept of like running a family, they're introducing that into this episode, which I think is important as we kind of go further down the line, you know, in our discussion, that'll come up again.
Right. Well, and I think it's really interesting too to think of it, to kind of reframe Jabba and the way that he ran his empire and into that, because, you know, the only scenes we have of Jabba is just really of being like a kind of gross brute slug, right? But he did have to garner the levels of respect that he needed and create all of the connections that he needed for this to operate the way that it did. And so we're kind of seeing that he was a competent leader, whether he was, you know, a good guy or not. Obviously he wasn't, but he was a competent leader for what he was doing. And so Fett now has to go back and figure out what's going on. What was he talking about that he's not, that he needs to go back and see what's going on in Garza's place. And he goes back, and there's, you know, this short moment of him being invited to come in as guest, but no more of this like take your helmet and fill it up with gold coins kind of stuff.
Yeah, she calls him Mr. Fett. Right.
It's not the due respect anymore, right? The way it was.
It's like, please don't do that.
and then you're like, okay, so what's going on here? And then we find out why the litter's important.
Yeah.
Which you get the drums and this whole thing, and she says
so cool.
The twins are in charge, and then we see the twins coming in, and that whole scene of them coming down the street was awesome.
Yeah. Geek out moment. And they looked great too. Just the graphics and everything.
Yeah, and the conversation that they have back and forth is excellent as well.
I loved how he's using that like rat thing just to like dry his sweat. Right. That was so disgusting.
I was expecting him to eat it, and then he just like starts like patting himself
different, but it's like such a hut thing. You're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, and they're being carried along on this litter by, you know, tens of people. Yeah, it wasn't nearly enough. You see him squirming the whole time. It was great. And they come around the corner, and they stop, and you see that it's much more impressive than any of Boba Fett's entrances. It's very intimidating. It clearly states who's in power in the situation.
And that's the language that these people speak, is like all the show of the huts.
Right. And that's something I feel like we're going to have
the crowd shots. Yeah.
Yeah. Like and I feel like we're going to have to learn along with Boba Fett what that's going to look like for him, because he's going to have to do it at some point. But what that's going to look like is, by the end of this episode, you get the sense that it's going to be different, but just as impressive.
Oh, snap. So. I think I know what's going to happen. Okay.
You got it. Yeah, I was thinking that too. I was like, what's it going to look like when he comes through? So I'm intrigued. I'm not going to make any predictions yet, because I'm willing to be really surprised with this stuff. But
sure. I keep wondering, and I said this to Angela last week, I was like, there's part of me that hopes that he just kind of eventually is like, nah. You know those Mandalorians I met that are going to take back Mandalore? I'm going to go help them instead. Like there's this part of me that just wants him to be like, no. So I don't know. I'm very excited because I have like no idea really where it's going.
Or maybe that's why he ends up going back to meet with, because we're not really sure where this falls in the timeline of him and meeting with the
Mandalorian.
Mando. Yeah.
That's a good one. We assumed because it was, you know, with Fennec, like, and we know it has to be after he meets her, but it's like, I assumed this whole time, you know, that this is like, and he has his armor, you know, so it has to be after that. But yeah, I don't know.
Yes, it's at least towards the end of the first season of The Mandalorian, but it could be right there. And then he decides, okay, No, I'm gonna head off and I'm done with this stuff. I'm gonna go do the Mandalorian stuff because that was cool. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how all that goes too. And then we get a small cameo here from a character that anyone who's familiar with the comics will know. And this is, and I'm going to butcher this name because it's a Wookiee name, and you see it written, and it's like, whatever, that's a cool name. And then you can't pronounce it because it's just physically impossible. But it's Black Krrsantan is his name, Krrsantan. So I imagine there's some kind of growling going on in there.
I got chills when I saw him.
Yeah, like everybody wants that action figure now.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
He's awesome.
And I don't follow any of the comics and stuff. I don't know if you guys do, or if Father or Andrew do. Like, I'm sure this will come up at some point. But I just in some of my research, I guess he showed up in, I think, like the Dr. Aphra comics, I think, if that's right.
Yes.
Or so he's like, this isn't like a new character. Like this is his live action intro, which is cool.
Right.
But, oh my gosh, he was so intimidating.
Well, and I like the establishing shots that they do of him too, is so that they didn't have to really hire a, super tall actor for the character. They just kind of put him in positions where he looks much taller than the people that he's standing around, which is really cool. And he's supposed to be huge by even Wookiee standards. He's supposed to be a very large Wookiee. So a very large Wookiee is a very large creature indeed. And so it's interesting to see that.
With a very large gun.
Yes. And not
again,
your typical
the
bowcaster.
show of power, and like all the appearances.
And that shoulder pad with the spikes coming off of it and everything. It's like, this is ridiculous. But I'm interested to see the fight. I want to see how Fennec and Boba Fett put up against this guy, or if they even have to. Maybe he ends up coming over on their team by the end of it. But it's definitely a full force show of power, and the kind of throwaway here is that the twins are not going to commit violence because it's bad for business, right? They're not going to. And I love that good cop, bad cop they kind of have playing off of each other there too, which is really nice. The sister's very offended and wants something to happen. And the brother's like, no, I have more patience than that. And so we find out that Fett is not the only one interested in Jabba's empire. And that, I think, is kind of the crux of where we're going to be moving forward with the show in the present. But that's the limit of the present that we get at this point. Except for one thing. Did you guys catch the really quick line that Fennec says to Fett before we go back into the past? If we want to kill them, we're going to have to get permission.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm intrigued about who they have to get permission from. That's going to be.
And I wonder, like, I don't know if, I think I just assumed that Tatooine was in Hutt space because of like episode 1. Tatooine is controlled by the Hutts. They're gangsters. Jabba on Tatooine, but clearly it's not in Hutt space because of the way the mayor specifically says that the Order of the Night Wind's not permitted to operate outside of Hutt space. So now I'm wondering, like, clearly there's like a, this power struggle going on, but it's like, are these twins, like, are they the top of the heap? Like this, I think we all assumed there would be some Hutt stuff in this. So it'll be really interesting to see that flesh out a little bit more.
Yeah, as the story developed, and this is, I haven't really jumped in on this because I didn't know if it was what was canon anymore, because the way it was before the expanded universe, the legacy stuff, Jabba was an outsider. He wasn't part of the Hutt thing. He went off and made his own way. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so he made his own empire separate from the Hutts, and that's why he was able to kind of act independently of their whole shtick. So now we're getting confirmation of that, basically, that Jabba was a loner. He went out and forged his own way on Tatooine. These cousins are interested in the crime element that he's developed out here because it's profitable, it's reasonable. And then as we see later in this episode, there are other factions that are interested in Tatooine and using Tatooine for their purposes. So we'll push into that a little bit as we go into this next part. And that takes us into the flashback. So again, we go into the back to tank and
why is he always in there?
People keep calling it flashback to.
I'm
loving that.
I think that's not. I think it's not that he's always in there. I think that what we're getting is it goes back to him healing up, remembering the how he ended up in that tank. So I don't think it's that he's like constantly going back and sleeping in the tank, but it's that we're like it's a touch point back. So
well, and I don't know if this is like
idea. I just
see the back to, and then he goes back to the remembering.
Yeah. I just remember that line that he said to Fennec at the beginning, the first episode, where he was like, the dreams are back or the nightmares are back or something. So to me, that almost signaled like we are going to see that, you know, recurring, but also for him, this is a recurring thing, you know? So I don't know. Who knows with the way that they kind of cut this show together, like it's non-linear. It doesn't have to be linear, you know? It doesn't have to be that what we see is right after what we have previously seen.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's almost like that where like you guys, you know, I know it's not just me, but I'll speak for myself with, you know, in my prayer life, you know, when things finally slow down, you know, like when I go to adoration or something like that, and you know, just those moments where it's like there's a lot of the external sort of duties and things like that are set aside for a few minutes, and it's like sometimes like a sledgehammer, you know, or like like the 2x4 right in the face of like, here's all the things you need to kind of work out, or like here's a memory from when you were a kid that you haven't resolved yet, or here's, I'm like, what are you doing to me right now? And so I almost wonder if that's like his version of like, you know, he's getting his little bit of like off to the side piece. It's the only time you really see him alone, you know. I mean the current thing, and it's like, now I'm off to the side. This is like his little sanctuary, his little like holy time, whatever you want to call it. And it's like, he's got a lot to process, this guy. You know, I mean,
yeah.
And there's, I mean, we're going to keep unpacking that, you know, for weeks, because there's so much with just that, like who he is and his relationship with his dad, and, you know, like, who knew there was this much to this character, you know?
Right. Well, I think we all did. We were just waiting for it.
We wanted it so badly.
40 years.
40 years.
We've been interested in him for way too long for there not to be this much about him, right?
Yeah, yeah.
He went from what, 3 lines in the first movie to this?
Yeah, they're not going to make a shirt. It's like, no, it actually turns out he's pretty two-dimensional. Yeah.
No. It was just a bounty hunter. That's
right,
it.
It's just yeah. Or like the Lego, like you take I have the Mandalorian, we got, you know, the Christmas gifts, Star Wars Christmas gifts, of course, abound, and I need a room for them at this point. And you take the Mandalorian helmet off of like the Mando and Grogu Christmas set, and it's literally just a black stump. Like they don't even bother painting a face on the Lego piece. I'm like, I don't think Pedro Pascal's going to be happy with that.
Right? He did have a face.
Yeah, it's like literally faceless. No.
Well, and I think that goes back to the origins of like the, you know, the Western, where you have the cowboy, the unnamed cowboy.
Yep.
He comes into town, and that's our main character. That's the character we follow. And we get kind of the same sense here, you know, where I think, you know, one of our group had said that this was kind of like a Dances with Wolves moment, where he's
totally,
you know, the cowboy that's now part of the indigenous tribe and has to learn their ways and really, but leans into it and learns what he needs to survive, but also just out of respect for them and the offer that they've made of saving his life, even though that wasn't their initial purpose. He's serving them in that way. And we get a lot of that in Star Wars. There's a lot of that life debt kind of mentality.
It's a real Last Samurai kind of vibe too. You know, a little more recently. Yeah.
I thought about that too, definitely.
Right.
So, yeah. And so we get, we're taken back to this past where Fett is establishing his place in the Tuscan Raider tribe, and he's learning how to use a gaffy stick from the Tuscan warrior. That's the only name we have for her right now, who's played by Joanna Bennett. Absolutely one of my favorite characters.
Cool. Yes, that's another action figure I need.
Amazing character. And I have my today my 12-year-old was sitting with me watching it, and he was just like, he's always liked the Tuscan Raiders, like really enjoyed them. And so, you know, when we do Star Wars RPG stuff, he's a Tuscan Raider. That's normally his thing. And so he is just losing his mind watching this series, because it is completely up his alley. But he loves her character. He's just completely enamored with the fight scene and the way that she uses the gaffy stick. And I love how it's like, you know, she teaches him this thing and then disarms him. And you know that's going to come back later.
Yeah.
But then the way that it comes back and that she's able to then dodge, grab her gaffy stick, and then trip him and put him back on the ground. It's like, oh, no, you're not, you haven't learned that well yet.
Right.
So
exactly.
I love those moments where, the training montage does not end with the perfect warrior. No.
Yeah.
So they are, the Tuscan tribe's out digging for these black melons. And then we get the introduction of this hover train that passes through. And this went right back to me. This went back to, the original who the Tuscans were, where, Luke was always worried about them being out there just kind of taking pot shots at him on his speeder. The race, when they're doing the pod race and the Tuscan Raiders are out there just shooting down into the racers. And we see that come up with this, where the train is driving across this waste and for no apparent reason just begins firing on the Tuscans.
Right. It immediately takes us back. I mean, especially as people who grew up in the United States, I think, and being familiar with the Western, in particular, just knowing that relationship, right, that the Tuscans were supposed to be the Indians, right, quote unquote, of the Western, and that put them right back in that, you see a train in a desert, it's a Western, right? And then, but then you have these innocent people being fired on, and it's like, it immediately turns the table on you as a viewer. It's like, oh yeah, like they're not just the bad guys, like in the Westerns, and so I thought that was really just like very intentional, to just throw us off right away, so that it kind of it puts us back in this relationship between Boba and these people, because now I think a lot of people, after seeing this particular scene, their own relationship with the Tuscans has changed. The way that they see them, the way that they relate to them has changed, especially these days, because a lot of us have gone through grief and loss and all those type of things. So it's a very relevant theme that we're more familiar with now.
Right. And I think it's interesting to see Fett's reaction to this, because he's very struck, and it happened with the biker gang initially, in the first episode, when the biker gangs like kind of swoops in and just murders the people on the farm for their water. He seems upset by it, but can't really do anything about it at the moment. And so this time now he sees this train, and again he's upset by the injustice, which is really, it's not something that you had thought of Boba Fett being, but when you go back through his life history and seeing the Jedi, having killed his father right in front of him, and then some of the other things that we see him go through during the Clone Wars series, when he's trying to run his own group of bounty hunters as a child, basically, it plays into that. And you see that there is some sense of justice to this character, that it may be greater than what we were given to believe at first.
Absolutely.
He's more than just a bounty hunter, right? There's some depth here. And so he goes back, and I love the scenes where he's having to like talk with them and mime the conversation with them. So he's got this kind of hodgepodge, sort of sign language going with them. And
I learned that is actually called TSL, Tuscan Sign Language. And that was actually developed by, it was developed for Mandalorian season 2 when he's speaking with the Tuscans. And there was an actor, a deaf actor, who was hired specifically to portray a Tuscan, and also to help them develop the Tuscan sign language. So he actually did research on like the Tuscan culture and like Tatooine, and then he incorporated that into, because he didn't want it to just be ASL. He wanted it to be specific to them. So that's really neat that like this is still continuing to be used, and to see, I think for the deaf community to be able to see that too is very important.
That's very cool. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that, so that's really neat. My daughter, who's learning ASL right now, and and actually confusing sometimes because I know enough to recognize some signs, and she knows enough to like try and have silent conversations with me, and I'm like, I know about half of what you just said. But yeah, so I'll have to mention that to her because that's really neat. She'll love that. Very cool. And I think that, you know, it's fun to see that he's picked up the culture, not just the trappings of it, but he's embraced where he is and is developing that connection with these people on such a deep level.
Right.
And so he explains to them, I can stop the train. And he finally is like, okay, look, I know you're not going to stop the train right now, but I just need a rifle and a stick and I'll be back by morning. And he goes off to the bar to find the biker gang.
Which apparently is Tashi Station.
Yes. It's I was having a blast like with YouTube deleted scenes because like the which I guess it's Anchorhead, I think, which Luke references in A New Hope. But I wasn't familiar with this. Like I had seen the deleted scenes of like Biggs, where Luke is out there talking to Biggs, but what I never saw the full sequence somehow. Where like, you know, it would have been the first intro to Luke's character. He's, you know, working, he has like a boonie cap on, he sees the space battle going on. And all it is in the cutscene is like just some flashes up in the blue sky, and he's like looking at it, and he runs to Tashi Station to try to show his friends, like, look, there's a space battle going on. And Cammy and Fixer, the two we see in this episode in the bar, like run out, and they're kind of like, you know, nah, it's nothing. And then he ends up talking to Biggs after that. And it was like, the more I looked at it, I was like, this really, looking back on it, I don't think this would have fit, you know, like the way we introduce or get introduced to him in the original now is like so much better than this.
Thank you, Marsha Lucas.
I just thought like, but I thought like, what a, like, you know, I was telling my wife about this. I was like, this is just a great example of where like anyone can watch this show and have fun with it and absolutely not need to know any of what I just said. but they spent the time. If you go back and watch that cutscene on YouTube when, like, you know, Luke runs into Tashi Station, like, guys, look at, you know, come on out. That bar, it's like identical. Every little detail, like the amount of time they spent to recreate that, that they didn't have to do, you know, and I really respect that, you know, when, you know, again, they could have done it so much simpler, so much cheaper, you know, but I think that's really getting to the heart of, like, you know, Favreau and Filoni and these folks who really know how to do this right, you know. So that was, I thought, a really cool sequence.
Well, they love Star Wars, and I think that's it shows.
It's like there's like a reverence, you know what I mean? Like not religiously, but I'm just, you know, there's like that respect, and that's really meaningful.
And they know that there are nerds out there that are gonna look up the deleted scenes online.
Absolutely.
And go, I think I recognize this, and put two and two together, you know.
Right.
Many nerds.
What nerds? Who knows?
No.
But can I just say, like okay, so Boba, I love the entrance, right? Like the whole, like, the gang is being a bully and everything, and then Fixer's like, it's not right, you know, and then, you know, you see the shadow of Boba Fett on the back of the wall, and it's just like, it's so Western. It's so great.
Yep.
But then Boba he's got this gun, this rifle, and he starts like hitting people with it like a stick. Right. And I don't know if you realize that, but I realized that after a couple of times watching it, I was like, he's still fighting like a Tuscan with a gun, like, to where, you know, before this, like, you know, before he fell into the Sarlacc, we had just known him as a guy who uses a gun, right, to shoot people, not to like try to hit them with it or anything. He wasn't a hand-to-hand combat kind of guy, you know?
Well, but it's really interesting because this tells you something about his character. The only person he shoots in that group is the one that pulls a blaster pistol on him. And that says something about him. You know, he's only going to meet the amount of force that he's met with. And I think we see that later, you know, as it comes up later, he's not interested in ruling by fear, which is sort of going to have to play out somehow. But he's not interested in just, you know, wholesale, I'm going to murder you if you don't do what I say. Right. He wants to meet the level of force that he's dealt and combat it at that level to win the respect, but then also to, that's it's kind of like a personal code. And so I'm really interested. I haven't had a chance to yet. I want to go back and watch the other scenes that we have of Boba Fett and whether or not it's the same thing.
Oh, I did. Because it's a very short compilation.
Oh no, it's not much, right? It's
and the only time that we actually see him like pull a gun to shoot somebody is Return of the Jedi, when they're on the sail barge and Han's like, Chewbacca's talking to him, is like, what? Boba Fett? What? And then he like turns around, Boba Fett's on the other side with the gun to shoot him and like throws him into the Sarlacc. So that's literally the only time that he is like this close to shooting somebody. Any other time he draws his weapon, but it's just kind of for show or, to show that he's ready. But yeah, that's it. It's a very short compilation if you want to look it up.
Well, there you go. See, so maybe this is a long-standing code of honor that he has that we just haven't learned about yet. So, and I'm interested to see how far back these past memories are going to go, because I think we've gotten the Tuscan Raiders because it's the most interesting story and the most relevant story to what's going on. But I think that there's more there because we've also had some of his childhood that have been played in through what he's, through like the Vision Quest at the end of this episode and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see. And
did you guys notice, by the way, this is the second time in a row that there's been some, I think it's when he was drinking from the black melon in the first one, but in this one, like, I really think they're deliberately playing around with that. Maybe, I don't know, but that Polynesian spa commercial he did, because like he doesn't say a word, he fights all of them, then he walks over, grabs the drink, swigs it, and he's like, and just like sets it down and like walks out there. It's so perfect for some reason, for his character. I don't know why, and even like and we could do a whole show just on this, but I just thought I'd throw this out there too, just in passing, as far as like, I really want to go back now. Father Andrew, I know you're going to listen to this. I want to go back and watch Attack of the Clones again, sort of soon, because as many times as I've seen it, and you have the same actor, but like he's doing such an amazing job. Like Boba and Jango are not the same character. Like he's a clone. It's 20 years later. Like there's all the reasons to have him play this character that are so obvious, like on a practical kind of level. But like, in theory, like you could have had someone else play this character. Daniel Logan could have played it. Like, you could even have people associated with the originals play him. But like, I just think it's so neat to kind of actually have this original actor play this character, but somehow have him be so different, and just that's so cool. I want to go back and kind of, well, Angela, you would, of course, I forget what you said to Father on that episode. It was like 4 minutes that Jango has on screen. Yeah. It's not a lot of time. But yeah, I really want to sort of sing his praises for this, because I don't know how you do that. Like just so, you're a clone, you're similar, all those cues are there, but like you're not the same person though,
Right.
That's so cool. You take those life experiences, and I think that's something that Tim Morrison's so good at is just imbuing this character with that background, that you don't doubt the decisions that he makes. You really do. You buy that this is what he would do. He would exist with this Tuscan group, and he wouldn't, he would take it as this was his place. And then you go and you think, okay, man, yeah, this is the guy who, during the Clone Wars, he was a bounty hunter because that's where he was. And then he ended up being, tossed around by that group in a pretty harsh way. And he dealt with that. And then he ended up becoming a fantastic bounty hunter in his own right. And now he's made this decision to change because he ended up in the Sarlacc pit. and that's just one of those life reflection moments, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's really great. And I feel like it's more than I was expecting, which is a big deal, because I didn't know what to expect, but I was expecting something interesting, and this is taking it in a completely different direction and is really interesting. And so we see, the development here is that he grabs these bikes and takes them back to the Tuscan Raiders, because his plan is that he's going to not just take care of the train for them, but teach them how to take care of the train.
Mm-hmm.
And despite the humor moment where they start like trying to tear the the bikes apart on him, he's like, no, wait.
No.
Those are for you. They're for you to use. And then the communication I thought was hilarious because he's like, I'm giving them to you as a gift. And he turns around and goes, those are mine. Those are mine. Stop. Yeah. So that whole scene where he's talking to them, he's telling them, I'm going to teach you how to use these things so that you can fight the train. And we get so much lore about the Tuscan Raiders in these couple of scenes where we learn that, they're not savages. They're post-apocalyptic holdouts, basically, that are just trying to make do in this world that they've been handed. And it's just one line. I love it when they do this kind of stuff where there's like the one line where they say, after the seas dried up.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Like, what?
Yeah.
Wasn't that in like Expanded Universe? I don't know if it was canon. Okay.
I think it was, but I don't remember.
Somewhere.
And so I was like trying to dig back through and figure out. Because it sounds familiar, but it's one of those things that maybe it's just like, lore mentioned somewhere by someone. Mm-hmm. But how long it has to have been like that is intense because, the Outworlders came in and started farming moisture from the air. So it's not like there were seas there when people came from space. They just came from space to this dry world that had these natives on it that had been living this way for generations, supposedly, before they even got there. So I don't know. I think we'll see more of that. I'm intrigued, especially how his vision quest kind of turns out at the end. It seems like that's going to be a theme that comes up a little more with these guys. Mm-hmm. And then he decides he's going to train them, and he says it's you go forward and you go, and then you pull back to stop. It's just like riding a bantha, which apparently it's not. So what do you guys think about this training sequence that they go through?
It was totally fun. It was like Tuscan driver's ed, and reminded me of, my own teenage years. No, but I really liked how we got to it was a charming moment. It was a moment for them to be that for us, to again, like for our relationship with the Tuscans to develop in a new way. And so I it was fun. It was one of those lighthearted moments, and I guess it was Star Wars humor,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I this isn't me originally here speaking this, but I heard some fun discussions about like just the kind of, well, you could say real world, I guess, reality of like these folks, like the fastest thing they ride is a bantha. Mm-hmm. So like the concept of like, jumping from this to that and like inertia and stuff like that, like it would be really, really, really challenging. And mad props to Luke for doing it on his first try in Return of the Jedi. So it kind of makes that cooler somehow too.
Well, and I think the whole idea of trying to catch up with this speed train, this hover train, it's kind of crazy. It's really out there, but Boba Fett's like, he's convinced these people can do it.
He trusts, yeah.
He trusts that they're gonna be able to step up to it, and I think it's funny, like the trying to train them to jump from one to the other. That was my favorite part of it. And then when the one guy runs over the other one after he falls off.
Yes. It was, well, and this whole sequence coming up here too, like, and I don't want to get ahead of it, but I thought even in the concept art, it was interesting because truth be told, like I haven't seen Lawrence of Arabia in a long time, but this is absolutely, and many people have pointed this out, this is like totally like a lift from a sequence in that film. And if you look carefully in the concept art at the end, it's interesting because like when they show that sequence, like they're very clearly not garbed like Tuscans. They have them made up to look like the Raiders in Lawrence of Arabia, I think, to kind of, specifically get that across, which of course, Lawrence of Arabia, which had Alec Guinness as Prince Faisal in it. So there's another, Star Wars, even a Star Wars Tatooine reference and connection. So, but yeah, that was a fun, like the Old West thing, but also that, also the sort of mystique and kind of, yeah, I guess mystique's a good word of that kind of Middle Eastern kind of feel to it too, which is part of the influence as well, which was cool.
And then we get the awesome train heist sequence where they come up along the train and they jump in or jump on top and are trying to grapple. That was really exciting. I think my favorite moment again is coming back to that Tuscan warrior when she just like wholesale drives the thing right into the train and jumps off on top of the train. Yeah. That's what they should have done at the beginning.
Yeah, just let her do it. Oh. Was that a pod racer engine up there? It looked like it, or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting the way it works out because that droid keeps going back and like trying to overclock the engine. Right.
He was my favorite character in the whole episode.
And then when he falls out at the end and gets up on the little four spidery legs, it's like, oh,
come on,
it's creepy. But yeah, so the train heist goes about as well as you would expect it to. About kind of a 50-50 win-loss scenario there. They manage it. They get it down. And then we're introduced finally to who the characters are, and we see that this is the Pike Syndicate. So these are the guys that is this the first time we've seen live action?
I believe.
Well, without their masks on, because they're in Solo. And that's what, like, it was driving me nuts because I'm like, why does that helmet look so familiar? And I had a Solo vibe, but I was thinking the wrong thing, like during the actual train heist, because I Solo hit me in the head, and I'm like, is it? But they're not Black Sun or like or Crimson Dawn. What are they? And then when they were still and out there, and like they took the masks off, I was like, oh yeah. And then he said Kessel, and that's when it finally sank in.
Yeah. So we get the sense that the Pike Syndicate now is involved. So. Now we've expanded the definition of what the tribes of Tatooine means.
Right.
Not just the Tuscan tribes, but also all of the crime tribes. And I love how he says, where the guy asks, are you going to kill me now? And he says, well, it depends. Are you carrying spice? And then the Pike Syndicate guy's like, what's spice? What's it like? I don't know. So
can you describe it to me?
God, it's kind of like that stuff right there. Okay.
That's like something my daughter would say to me, not about spice, but about something that's like, no, you know exactly what I'm asking you right now. Like, come on.
Yeah, definitely. And so I love how that scene plays out. I love the fact that they got Fett just sitting on this kind of makeshift throne of stuff, drinking one of the black melons, like it's a very Conan kind of scene. And
yes.
Very fitting for him. And he offers them a trade. He says, I will look, these aren't savages. You are crossing their land. They lay an ancestral claim to this land. You need to pay them to cross it. And he lays down terms for them that I'm assuming are reasonable, but I don't even know. I don't even know how good a businessman Fett is at this point. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And then offers them their lives as kind of the reward for them delivering this message. And they're nervous because they're going to have to cross the desert. And he tells them, you're going to cross the desert just like these people, single file. You head off that direction. You're going to find Anchorhead before too long. And we'll give you some black melons for the trip.
And you're traveling under the Tuscans' protection, To me, I was very moved by this scene because I don't know if I'm like just a real empath or something, but I just saw in Tamara Morrison's eyes, like just the way that he delivered these lines of, because his response is to the Pikes who say, well, we thought you were uncivilized raiders. And this whole concept of, no, we are a people, like this is a people. And I felt like Tamara Morrison being Morty, he was really speaking also on behalf of like all Indigenous people by like saying these lines. And I think many people also, I was seeing just on Twitter and stuff, like a lot of people who do have that identity, they really felt that. But just the like delivering those lines, I think with like such strength and like almost pain at the same time, like to understand what that plight would have been like for these people to have gone through like so much through like, hundreds of years, assumingly, for a whole planet to turn from seas into desert and then just to be treated the way that they were. So the protection of the Tuscans. You now travel under the protection of the Tuscans. That was really important, because to me that was showing that they are civilized people, because they're going to protect you as you go forward, and you are going to be given just what you need to get where you're going, right? So yeah, I was really impressed by that scene.
Yeah, and it was really well executed too. Them coming up to the train and how they were, and then when they knock the water cap off the water tank, and it's raining on them, and they are just it's more wealth than they've ever been able to have. And because you see them out and how long it takes them to rake up just one of those stupid little black melons, right?
Right.
And that particular image of all the water coming out of the train, I have to give a shout out to Father Roderick von Hogen, who, basically started this podcast with Don Bettinelli, because he has also been analyzing these episodes, and he's been drawing a parallel between Boba Fett and Moses and the story of Moses. So when I saw that image of all that water coming out, and I heard what, Father Roderick was talking about, just this concept of like Moses and the rock, and the hitting the rock with the staff, and water flowing out, and it being a new beginning for the people who were in the desert. And that Moses was, the leader of the people. And then we go from this scene, we go directly into a scene where they're in a tent. Mm-hmm. And Boba begins his like kind of spiritual experience. So to me, that was kind of like, oh yeah, that is Moses, because Moses goes into the tent to meet God. And yeah, just a whole kind. So I want to give a shout out to Father Roderick and all that he's doing too, because he's pulling up all those kind of scriptural references too.
Well, and that's like the title of the first episode is, that, like we said last week, that reference to the naming of Moses' son Gershom, stranger in a strange land. So yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, and I think moving into that next scene, we get this very spiritual experience, which is the real acceptance of Fett into the tribe, but also an awakening of him to. It almost feels like a greater purpose than just what he's had, where he's been this grifter that's been kind of like bounty hunting and just wandering through the galaxy without a purpose. And it feels almost like this is a very clear moment that he's been given a purpose. And they offer him this lizard that...
That was so weird.
He's like, yes, I'll take him with me. And then the lizard jumps up his nose.
And no one saw that coming.
No. It was completely stunning.
It reminded me a little bit of when I was in the army, and like you learn so much and you study so much, and like you really commit to trying to understand cultures you're going into and everything. But there's always a clunky, humorous sort of like, I forget who it was, a famous historian, who once said, and speaking of he was specifically speaking of Roman history, and this guy was like, he knew Latin perfectly and knew all this, like way more than all of us combined could ever know about Rome. And he very humbly said at one point something to the effect of Cicero's chambermaid knew more about Rome than he did. This idea of like, you study it but it's not the same, and it can't ever be the same. And so that idea of like, I'm reminded, I never had a lizard jump on my nose, but like moments of like, you do everything you can to study, and then you're in that culture and just something happens, or you just get laughed at, and like, because you totally blow it, or something, you say something wrong, and it was funny. And I love like him, like, yes, I will take this lizard, like trying so hard to be culturally sound, and shoots up his nose, and he's like, I think I swallowed it. Right. And I'm sitting there like, in my own way, I've been there, kind of. Like,
definitely.
More extreme,
oh my gosh.
But that's what it felt like. I was embarrassed, but like, no. So that was I was laughing so hard.
Yeah, and it spawns this moment where he goes on this kind of quest. And so this actually isn't a totally unheard of thing. There are cultures that use hallucinogenic frogs for kind of these dream questy kind of things. And then recently, one of our other podcasts, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, talked about mind control parasites.
Yes.
So these, like parasites that crawl into insects' brains and force them to do things. Like there's an ant, a parasite the fungus that takes over an ant's brain and makes it move up to the tallest branch that it can, and then, grows out of its head. And so this is not like, this actually is not terribly off the beaten path of sci-fi. This is kind of real world kind of stuff.
I know. I kept seeing headlines like Star Wars gets weird. I was like, was it really that weird though?
Right?
Like,
no.
Nope, that's that. Totally, I can see real world examples of this kind of thing happening.
Well, and this was definitely, it was condensed. It was like one night sequence, and this is getting not quite our Kiwi listeners, but more of our Australian fans. I'm thinking of like the Aboriginal walkabout kind of experience, when you're in your teens and stuff. So, and there's a lot of cultures that have something like that, some sort of coming of age or rite of passage, and sometimes there is some sort of like you said, too, like this hallucinogenic component that's not uncommon, so that was it was interesting to see this play out.
And having an animal spirit guide also.
Right.
I've been learning, taking some time to learn about the Māori culture just because Tamara Morrison has said that he contributes his ideas, in this character. And I learned that lizards are actually sacred for the Māori people, and that they're used in burial situations and as guardians, and they're very much a part of like this whole underworld concept for the Māori people. So I wonder if that was maybe one of his contributions, like let's make it a lizard.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah.
And then somebody said, and let's make it jump up his nose. It's kind of like, oh, okay. But it's great. It's a great scene where it and I think again this goes back to that humor, the Star Wars humor that's really good, where it's like it's subtle and it's about not being comfortable in the position that you're in,
right,
and kind of laughing about it, but then at the same time really embracing what's going on. And that's what's great about this scene, is that it has all of the seriousness that it needs, even with those little slapstick bits to it. And we see the hallucination that he goes through, the quest that he goes through is about the history of Tatooine. It's about his history, and the two get tied together in a very deep and moving way. And he ends up at this tree, which obviously there's no trees on Tatooine because there's no water, so there's nothing there. And he grabs a stick. And so I was going to the Noah story for me, right, was this the idea of the dove going out and finding the olive branch and bringing it back. That's kind of what this represents to that culture. And he goes out and finds a gaffi stick, or what will become a gaffi stick eventually. And in their culture, instead of it being a peace, an offering of peace that comes back, that the world's going to be right, it's a tool that allows them to move through that world. And that's what he comes back with, is that tool.
And I think for Boba, it's also, I mean, it's kind of a sign of like his interior peace in a way, because I think as he's wrestling with that tree, he's very much wrestling with his own trauma and his own, inner turmoil. And that's part of that whole, ritual in the real world. When people go on these kind of quests, the idea of a tree in particular, I thought was interesting, because trees tend to represent families. And Boba himself is very much a lonely character in Star Wars. We've talked about, the last episode about him being the clone, and everyone, there's so many people that look like him and sound like him, but they're not him. And so this concept of like, who is he? Who is his family? We've seen in the Clone Wars that he tried to have a family of bounty hunters and it didn't work. It wasn't his family. And I think now as we see him with the Tuscans and this whole ritual that is brought about, it's like he's becoming a member of their family. So going back to that idea at the very beginning of the episode where the mayor's like, hey, running a family is more complicated than being a bounty hunter. It is. And I think he has actually come to learn that. He'll probably still continue to go on that learning process.
Right. Yeah.
But being a part of a family is something new to Boba Fett. like it really is new to him. And so I felt that this whole tree thing was a part of that family concept.
Yeah, and it really ties into the growth that he's going through as a character. So I'm excited to see what the rest of this, because we haven't met those two timelines up yet. Where he's back in the Hutt space, or the Hutt Syndicate kind of thing. So I'm interested to see how those two are going to mesh in the end. And then, like you said, the trauma that he has to deal with, it's not just the trauma of being in the Sarlacc pit, it's that trauma of being a child without an actual parent, but who his father is him, essentially, which is really bizarre and something you see him wrestle with as a child in these visions. And
right. I think that's what his expectation was. It's like, oh, I'm supposed to be my father, because he was kind of that was the only expectation that was kind of placed before him, was to just be his father's son. And to see what happened to his father, I think was traumatic for him, because it was like, well, how am I supposed to be my father? Am I going to end up like this too? And again, he was alone.
And then he comes back with the gaffy stick.
Quick question, not super important, but I was curious why, like, I have to go back and double check, but I thought the concept art, I remember when I saw the tree sequence, the red eyes were kind of weird, and I kind of just, but it was all weird and trippy, and I kind of forgot about it. And then the concept art, there's clearly depicted Jawas all around the tree.
Yeah.
And we talked about this a little bit last week, Angela and I, with the whole, like, the red-eyed Jawas from Mandalorian Season 1, not on Tatooine, which then Lando jokingly references in that Star Wars Lego holiday special, like, hey, off-world Jawas, like that. And so then we had these very clearly, like, extra yellow-eyed Jawas on Tatooine in episode 1 from the Boba Fett series. So I'm a little confused at why the red eyes. Maybe it doesn't matter, but I don't know. It was just, it added to the trippiness, I guess, but I don't know if that is significant or not.
Yeah, it could be part of the dream sequence. Just more. It was more of a conceptual, like, how he feels versus like, what's real and what's not real. So
because I didn't see any bodies. I just saw the eyes, and they actually reminded me more of whatever the things we never saw were. Remember episode 1 of Mando season 2?
Right.
When he's leaving that graffiti area and those creepy eyes, like, you don't really see what those things were. So I felt more like that. Like, it was just kind of a scarier kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of what they were trying to do with that, was just keep us in the know that was all surreal. There was nothing real. So he didn't actually go find a tree. Now, we don't know where the stick came from, but he didn't, there wasn't like a tree that he went,
because he breaks the branch in the vision. Yeah.
Yeah.
It could have been an old tree. Like from ancient Tatooine that's been dead for a long time, and
they burn something to make their fires.
Lizard knows where it is.
Which would explain the lizard knows where it is, right? And the lizard guided his mind to it, and that's how that's the only way to get to it. Yeah. All of that miming was just hilarious. Like, watching it was so great. So he gets back with the stick, and he is embraced into the Tuscan family officially. He's given the clothing of the Tuscans. He's presented to the tribe. The tribe approves, and then they take him down, and the warrior is there to meet him. And there's also a forge master there. Very Mandalorian feel here.
Yeah.
And he's going to teach him how to make this gaffy stick for himself. And so he goes through the whole process of making the stick. And that was a really cool moment. I liked it.
And his outfit, of course, it's the one that we saw him in when we first saw him as a non-dead character in the Sarlacc officially, So that's cool. That loop being kind of connected there.
I was really wanting Father Andrew to be on this episode because I know that Father Roderick, when he was watching Boba get, wrapped in all of these wrappings, that it reminded him of ordination. When you have your family actually cloaks you in your garments as a priest or as a deacon.
Cool.
And so for the Tuscans to be doing that for Boba was even more of that element of family. And as I was learning about the Modi, I also learned that black is a very important color for their culture that may or may not have been part of, the decision to make these black wrappings. But apparently black symbolizes the heavens. It symbolizes the realm of potential being and the long darkness from whence the world emerged. So it's almost like another birth moment, like a new life and all the potential that is before him now.
Yeah, and then I like the end. So this kind of ties us into the end scene where he comes back. He presents his gaffy stick. It is approved by the tribe, and he begins the dance. And then all of the rest of the tribe joins in the dance, and that was just a really powerful scene. Very strong way to end this episode.
Yeah, it was awesome. And it didn't look like a haka, which is the Modi like tribal battle cry dance. It's used in many situations, but I know that must have been very special still for Tamora Morrison to have been a part of this ritual dance of the Tuscans. Yeah, I was very, very moved by that. And to see that in Star Wars, it's all the culture, to be able to learn about all these different cultures of all these different species and just societies in Star Wars, it just makes it so much more rich and so much more lived in and real in a way, relatable for us as we're approaching the material, so that we can, see ourselves in our own cultures in all of these different scenes as well.
And for it to be authentic too, that these people are participating and giving of themselves to this thing that we all love so much and that we all appreciate so much. And it's adding to the richness of it, and that's to me is a really awesome part of this, that it's a collaborative effort in a very true way. And the more we can add that collaboration in, the better the product becomes. So any final thoughts before we wrap up this episode?
Well, I'm excited for next week. And I think another thing I heard a lot of kind of head scratching, with fans over was Rodriguez's comment about, like everything you've seen from the first 15 minutes of the first episode. And it's like, no, it's not, because it's like we still haven't seen like him meeting with the crime lords and stuff, but like they haven't really given. I mean, the only things off the top of my head that like seeing slave run or fire spit, or what's it called? I forget the name of the ship now that they've changed it to. Fire spray. You see his ship flying by in one clip. You see him meeting with these the Dons or whatever you want to call them, and then the scene of that sort of mysterious, female character on the speeder bike. To my knowledge, those are the only three things come to mind that I haven't seen yet. But we're only 2 episodes into 7, so it's exciting because there's clearly so much more, and I personally don't really anticipate 5 more episodes or 5 episodes, of just kind of like not a whole lot's happening. They're kind of like, I really think it's going to open up quite a bit, so I'm not worried at all about any of that. Some of the stuff folks have been concerned about. I'm loving it. I'm excited for next week, or this week, I should say.
Right? Yeah.
Soon.
Yeah, and I'm just looking forward to seeing where Boba's character has kind of grown and where he will continue to grow. Because he really is. He's been reborn in this series, and it's fantastic to be able to just watch his trajectory and to see how much more we have to learn about Tatooine, which we felt was the most known place, in all of Star Wars, the most familiar, and yet we're learning so much.
Yeah. No, I think that's really that. It's a testament to Favreau and Filoni and how they can really just crack open so much of Star Wars and make it take what's already lived in and then just expand on that, like you were saying with going back to an original set piece for the bar scene. And then that's fantastic. That's something that these guys do so well, and it just pulls us into it's great because it gets that nostalgia piece, but then it also opens up this new thing that everybody else can share in. And and I have to, in this, because I wasn't in the first episode, but I wanted to give props to Jennifer Beals for her portrayal, because the character that she gives is just so matter of fact, so real, and she's got these gigantic leku hanging off of her head while she's doing it, and looks perfect in that role. Like, she really pulls that off so well.
That's true.
So this is a great show. Like, I think I'm really looking forward to what comes next. I think that they do have way too much plot to be able to make a slow episode in here at all. So I trust them. I know that they're going to do what's good, and I'm really looking forward to this. All right, so that's it from us, listeners. What did you think of oh my gosh, I lost the episode title. What did you think of the Tribes of Tatooine?
Tribes of Tatooine.
There it is.
All right, so what did you think of the Tribes of Tatooine? Be sure to email us or comment on Facebook or Twitter and let us know what you thought. You can email any feedback to starwars@sqpn.com and find StarQuest on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. We're on Twitter @SQPN. We'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Wars, including Joseph R., Michael S., Christina F., Cecilia C., and Paul V. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Wars and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. Also, be sure to subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, whichever one of the listening channels that you prefer. To find previous episodes, you can check us out at Secrets of Star Wars, sqpn.com/Star Wars. So until next time, Angela Sealana, thank you for joining us for the Secrets of Star Wars.
My pleasure.
And Mike Creavey, thank you also.
Yep, can't wait till next time.
Looking forward to it. Once again, I'm Thomas Sanjurjo. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.